Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, and in today's video I want to talk about if your crested gecko is a lavender or not, and maybe what guidelines do you want to use and what guidelines do I use to decide if a crested gecko is a lavender or not. So let's get right into it. So first thing, and I pulled out this gecko here, Jane, to show you something that a lavender isn't, okay? So this gecko is not a lavender. Now, when we talk about lavender, what we mean is like a purplishly hue, or a tint that kind of does look lavendery, and typically it comes with lighter geckos. And as you can see here, Jane is a lighter gecko, but just because she's light doesn't mean she's lavender, right? So I know that seems like a very basic concept, and I'm going to pull out some babies and some other things too to kind of show you guys what maybe I consider lavender or what you don't. But this is something that I think we can all agree by looking at her, you would say it's a light gecko, but definitely not a lavender. So now let's show another gecko that is a lavender. Alright, so this here is Mr. Butterworth, who is definitely a lavender. And the way that you can tell he's a lavender, and I'll insert a picture of him fired up as well to kind of help out. But you can see right here he's got these purplishy hues that contrast really well with that white. So it makes it pretty obvious under here on the belly. You can kind of see some more of that purpley tone to him. And he's just a really pretty gecko. So, to me, Mr. Butterworth is a lavender because, as you can see with him fired up here, it's purple. He fires up like this really pretty purpley hue tone, right? Lavender. To whereas when he fires down, it's not quite, you know, that purple, but it's enough to where you can kind of tell that this gecko is a lavender. You can kind of look at it and be like, you can kind of see that this gecko has purple in it, and I guarantee that this gecko is a lavender, right? So, to me, personally, this is a lavender, and it's really not up for any debate as to whether Mr. Butterworth is a lavender or not, because he just is. I'm going to go grab one of his kids real quick, who I think has potential to be a lavender, but I'm not quite sure yet. But as you can see, once again, Mr. Butterworth, for sure a little lavender, and he's awesome. So let's put him up and let's get out another one. So as I was saying, this is one of his babies that to me, it's actually partially fired up right now, which is weird because I don't really see this gecko fired up too often. But to me, this gecko, right now it does not look like a lavender to me. When it's fired down, it definitely has a purplishy hue to it. Now, but what I'm wondering is though, since these browns, and if this gecko's fired up, these are very light, you know, browns, right? Will this gecko over time, will that brown pigment fade into what is a purplish looking gecko? And that's something that I wonder is like with a gecko like this, I look at it and I'm like, I've seen, you know, brownish geckos, right? And things like that. And I wonder if this is a fired up gecko, then over time it's gonna fade, right? Because that's one thing too, like a lot of crested geckos will not only fade their color with age, it's just because they shed so many times that their color does fade. And it's a very common thing, especially if you see geckos that are 5, 6, 7 years old, right? And then they don't fire up as much, and their colors aren't as vibrant, right? And that's a very blanket statement. That's not true for all geckos, but for the most part, and from what I have seen just from people who've, you know, posted pictures of geckos that are like, oh, we heard this gecko's 10 years old. It's less vibrant, right? And it fires up less. But when I see a baby gecko, because this is when their colors are the best, and this is when their colors, you know, shine the most, and this is when they fire up really dark and really pretty, right? So when I see a gecko like this that's fired up right now, I just wonder if that brown will fade over time. Now, only time will tell, right? You know, by the time this gecko's 2, you'll know if it's a lavender or not. It really won't take that long. Probably in the next 6, 7 months, you'll have a better idea on if this gecko is a lavender or not. But this is probably the closest of any of his babies that I have that have come to looking like a lavender. So I wanted to kind of show it to you guys just to maybe get your thoughts on it if you think that this could be a lavender. Or some of you might straight up just consider this a lavender. Who knows? It's really in the eye of the beholder. It's a lot of things with crested geckos because we don't have the we don't have as many defined genetics as say like the ball python community does, or even the leopard gecko community does. We're kind of, a lot of the things that we talk about, you know, like super dal or things like that, a lot of it really is in the eye of the beholder as to what you think it looks like And if it's a lavender to you, then maybe it is to you, because maybe it fits in your lavender project, right? Whereas I might look at that lavender project, I might go, that's not a lavender to me. But anyway, now I want to show you a couple geckos that people who have bought the babies have told me that they believe it's a lavender. Some of them have. Others have said this isn't a lavender. I personally don't label this group as lavender, but I'm going to let you guys kind of decide what you think, because some of you guys might think it is a lavender because some people already have. But let's jump right into that. Okay, so the gecko that's in question and the babies that I'll be talking about come from this little stud right here. This is Billy. As you can see, it's, once again, you get in that territory of it being a very light brown. He's kind of, I wish he was completely fired down right now because you guys would get a better picture of it. He's still very fired down, so it depends on what you base it on, is a lot of the times on if it's a lavender or not. For me personally, I like geckos that fire up lavender to be the technical lavenders, and those are very few and far between, which makes it a little more rare, which means I'm probably not right, you know, completely, because if I'm only considering the highest end of something to be that only gene, then I'm forgetting that there's a huge, you know, there's a big spectrum on, even if we take Harlequins, for example, right? There's a huge spectrum of Harlequins, so that'd be like me only wanting to deal with extreme Harlequins, right? So I see that side of the argument. I think maybe I'm too like focused on what I want to work with, and for me it's got to be this, right? Which doesn't mean that that's necessarily correct. That's just the way that I've, you know, rationalized it in my mind. A lot of people say lavender, just if it doesn't have to fire up lavender, right? It just needs to fire down and have that purple hue to it, and it carries the trait or the gene or whatever, you know, the coloration, if you will. So, like I said, to me, I like it if they fire up. I don't sell his babies as lavenders. Now, once again, there are much, much better examples than him because he is not in that mode right now. But you can kind of see. And the other thing too, guys, a lot of this stuff just depends on lighting, right? I mean, you can make a lot of colors happen depending on light. But to me, this is just not a lavender. But I want to show you guys, and I'm hoping a couple of his babies are fired down so we can get like a really good view, and then you can decide if you think that not necessarily if he's a lavender, but if his babies have it. I can tell you for a fact that the females that I pair him to, they don't have it, but let's go ahead and let's kind of show you the babies. Alright, so unfortunately this is the most fired down baby that we have, if it would even focus. There we go. This is the most fired down baby that I have from him. Kind of bummed because it's not, they fire down a little lighter than this. But I think that also kind of just goes to prove my point. That's why I don't consider this line lavender, is because, and I think I actually have some photos, and if I do, I'm gonna insert them here because you guys will see what I'm talking about, because I sound like a crazy person right now. I'm just like, oh yeah, this line, it has to be lavender. Of course it's part lavender. Come on, guys, look, and then I'm showing zero evidence of why this line would even be considered lavender. So hopefully I have some photos that I kind of show you there. But like I said, and this is where it kind of comes back to me, if I have to go through this much work to decide if something is a lavender or not a lavender, then to me it's probably not. And I'm just not going to go through the trouble of labeling it as such, because I don't want anyone to, I'm not trying to upsell or whatever. Here's another one of his babies. So typically, and this is just what I found too, is that some of these geckos that fire up this like super dark black, like really nice, like almost jet black color, when they fire down, it usually has like a purplish hue to it. So that could be part lavender as well. But I don't consider this line lavender. And like I said, that could be just because I have like what I consider like a for real lavender line, in my opinion. And that's like, you know, it seems like a lot of stuff that I talk about, a lot of it does end up coming down to personal opinion and what you're willing to do. It's a lot of like people, you know, a lot of people think that if you throw a bunch of like lavender, creamsicle, this and that, you can upcharge for things, and because it's a specific line, right? And it's all this other stuff. I I don't like to do that really, just because I don't think that that's necessarily, to me, I just like, I think that color is something that you should decide if you want to work with it, or if it's important to you, and I did a whole video on it even, and I don't know if it's really like on me, and that's not to say I'll never do it, but for right now, I'm just really not interested in telling you what color these geckos are, because if you get it, and you go, this is not what you said, I don't want to get, I want you to buy the gecko because you liked the look of that gecko. I don't want you to buy the gecko because it said it was something, and you're gonna work with that specific line, and you think that this is that gecko line, and it's really not. It's just something that I have that's that color, which more than likely it could have come from that line at some point. So I like to you know, under promise and over deliver instead of over promise and under deliver, right? So that's just my opinions on lavender. Like I said, key takeaway, you'll have arguments online of it has to fire up lavender, it has to fire down lavender. Honestly, I don't really care about that. I just, if you think it's a lavender and you think it looks good and it does have a purple hue to it, then, and it fits into your breeding projects, or you think it's a really sweet pet to have, then great. You know, go for it, because it's really, it's just a label at that point. It doesn't, I mean, you can go out and morph market, you see people label a lot of stuff, and it's wrong. So I don't know if lavender's like the thing to, if that's the cross to die on. But with that said, guys, that is gonna wrap up the video. I hope this kind of answered your question if you think your gecko's a lavender. If you want to send me your gecko and ask me if I think it's a lavender, I'll be more than happy to let you know yes or no, and I'll be honest with you, just because I don't really have a horse in the game or whatever, you know. I'm just, you know, just telling you what I see. So with that said, guys, thank you for all the support. I do really appreciate it. The channel's been growing super nicely, and it's very exciting to see, and I'm just really thankful for everybody who watches and everybody who hits that subscribe button. So until next time, guys, stay safe and stay positive.